Okay, I'm going to get started. Again, thank you all for attending. My name is David Flaherty. I'm the CEO of Magellan Strategies. Behind the curtain, if you will, is Craig Haverback. He's going to be helping answering questions. So this webinar is going to last about 30 minutes of me speaking to the slides, and then we're going to open it up for questions for at least 15 minutes. So please feel free to listen. To submit a question, up in the right-hand corner of your screen, you see a chat tab and then a Q&A tab. You can really use both of those options to submit a question. I ask that you submit them through the Q&A tab, but if you have a problem doing that, you can also set that up and do that in the chat. I'll answer questions at the end of my presentation. And again, I just appreciate you all being here. So with that said, I want to start off actually by, if you don't mind, polling the audience. If one of you could tell us, most of our clients are with local government, school districts, special districts, or a public policy organization. So if you don't mind answering that question right now, that would be great. It should pop up on your screen and let us know. If you don't have an interest there, that's fine as well. But we're just curious to get to know where folks are tuning in from and what organization they're with. So, okay, we're starting to see some numbers come in. About half local government, 8% school district, 8% special, a policy organization, and 4 other. Thanks for weighing in on that. I do appreciate that. And then I'm going to also ask you one other question relevant to this discussion today. Real quickly, just are you or your organization considering a ballot measure in 22? Just curious, feel free to chime in there. And again, I really do appreciate that your feedback. And once you answer that, you'll be able to move ahead and so forth. All right. So with that, again, I'm going to get started. Okay, first and foremost, Magellan Strategy is a public opinion research firm. We've been around for 15 years. We're located in Louisville, Colorado, and we specialize in surveys for local governments, special districts, school districts, and public policy organizations. We are proud members and financial supporters of CCCMA, the Colorado City and County Managers Association, CCI, Colorado Association of School Board, CASB, Colorado Association of School Executives will be attending their winter conference next week. So we hope to see perhaps some of you educators there, as well as CML and some other groups. We just want you to know we are friends of local government, school districts, and special districts. Who have we worked for? We've been around for a while. Some of you may not have heard of us. This slide just shows some of the organizations that we've helped out over the last 15 years. A lot of our work moving on from this is ballot measure work, ballot measure surveys. We are experts at conducting ballot measure surveys to secure funding for special districts, capital projects, and other things. We've really done a lot of work over the last 15 years. And we also do post-election surveys in case you did have a ballot measure that did not pass muster, if you will, to help understand perhaps how things should be refitted if you're going to go before voters again. We also do community surveys for both local governments and school districts. We have a couple of survey formats that are really helpful for letting your organization know and understand not just how either your students or families or residents feel about you, but the whole 360 view. So we do a lot of that work. And then we also do a lot of public policy stuff. We do healthcare, we do COVID, we do transit, we do affordable housing, a lot of different things. So that's just a quick primer on the kind of work we do. Now, today's topic is about ballot measure surveys. And honestly, if you're considering hiring a firm such as ours, have you ever asked them or thought, how well did you all forecast what was going to happen in the election? Well, we did 11 ballot measure surveys last year for 11 different organizations. And out of those 11, we said 10 were going to pass and 1 was going to fail. And that's exactly what happened. And please keep in mind, we are going to make this presentation available to all of you at the end of today. So don't feel that you need to see all these things. But we like to show how well we did or did not do. Town or monument police funding, half-cent sales tax increase. We forecast in the summer that 64% of voters were going to support it, and 63% actually did. So that was a pretty close one. It doesn't always end up like that, but we're pretty darn good at figuring out what voter support in opposition is going to be. The ones that we do miss, we're missing them in a runaway election, like City of Boulder, for example. We did a 0.3% sales tax extension, and we measured support at 74%. It passed by 85%. So things like that will occur. And again, I'm going to go over this real quickly, and you'll be able to see these exact ballot measures. Okay, today I want to talk about the 5 steps of developing a ballot measures survey that can lead to voter approval. These are time-tested, fundamental approaches to using survey research to help position your ballot measure to be in the best position to win. First and foremost, you better know your voter registration and turnout demographics. I'll show you that in a second. You need to ask the right questions to measure relevant opinions. There's a lot of things that matter, and I'll get to that in a little bit too. You need to educate and inform your voters or residents of the what and why. Why are you going to the ballot? Why do you need this money? How are you going to spend it? And including that information in the survey is extremely relevant and extremely important. And then after educating and informing voters with that information, measuring how much does it move the needle? Somebody that was a no, are they now a yes? Or were they an undecided, maybe a yes? And then finally, the importance of drafting good ballot language is absolutely critical. So first and foremost, let's talk about our voter registration demographics. What am I talking about? I know you may be squinting on your screen right now, but for every project we do, we come up with a voter registration report and past turnout report, because if you're going to be an effective pollster and know what you're doing, you better have this information at your fingertips, and we do. What are you looking at? We did a project for Mesa County Valley School District 51 last year to raise for a bond measure to build a new Grand Junction High School. Well, as you can see, active registration was about 100,000 people at the time. And you go back and what am I looking at here? This is the demographics of what turnout was in the 2020 election, the 2019 election, the 2018 election, and the 2017 election. And the demographics move around a lot. And what I mean by that is in 2019, seniors that are 65 and older made up 44% of all ballots cast in the 2019 election there. However, in the presidential election, they only contributed 30% of the ballots cast. So you really need to know that. So obviously, we're going to, since we had an election in 2021, make sure that our demographics and our survey is weighted appropriately to these demographics. So that's just an example. Another example here, Town of Erie. We're currently assisting them with a home rule ballot measure that'll be coming up. Same sort of scenario. Here's voter registration of exactly what it is. Here's what past turnout looked like. But if they place home rule on the ballot this November in the Home Rule Charter Commission, we're going to weight the results so that it's similar to November 2018's election, because that was the last midterm election. I'm not going to beat this to death so much, but the bottom line is you better know your voter demographics. Okay, moving on from there, asking the right questions and measuring the relevant opinions. What exactly am I talking about? Here's just some general ideas. One, some elections that we do to raise revenue for especially a metro district, people may not even know the metro district provides their road, their water, their public safety needs, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll ask an awareness question just to make sure, are you familiar with this metro district and the services they provide? First and foremost, after going on from that, job approval and satisfaction levels, especially it's for the department or the need that is being met. Do you think this police department is doing a good job? Do you think this fire department is doing a good job? Do you think the school district is doing a good job educating students? Those approval levels and those measurements are very important, because if they're not great, you may not want to go there and ask for a revenue increase of some kind. It's really important. Those things are going to factor into a voter's decision making. Very important. Does the organization spend taxpayer money wisely? I'll get to that in a little bit. And then measuring general voter support and opposition for a tax increase, as well as support and opposition for the actual ballot measure language if we have it. So just moving on from there, here's an example first and foremost. How familiar are you or would you say you are with the Eagle Vale Metro District's amenities and the services they provide? This is just an example of making sure. This is a project that we did last year up in the Eagle Vale Metro District, where they had a very unique ballot measure that was basically going to freeze and sort of time out what they were paying to the Metro District in the form of mill levy property taxes. Obviously, this turned out pretty good. Nearly half the people are very familiar, know who they are, 46% somewhat familiar. Another example, Moffat County School District RE1. Do you approve or disapprove of the job they're doing educating students? 61% said yes, they approve. This again was a project from last year. That's a good number. You want to be around 60 or north of that. The Monument Police Department, do you approve or disapprove of the job they're doing? 86% said yes, they definitely are approved, which is a great number. Now, this is a very strong Republican community. I know some of you are like, why do you ask partisan questions? Well, look, the bottom line is, folks, is we need that party affiliation because it really helps us understand where support's coming from, where opposition, and so forth. And you can see here, Republicans, 93%, they're very much supportive of their police department. Democrats are down at 71%. Still very strong, but yet there's more of a reservation there, as you can understand with public safety, reform the police, those sort of attitudes. Knowing these things are incredibly important. City of Lafayette, we did a public safety ballot measure for them. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The City of Lafayette is fiscally responsible and spends taxpayer money wisely. 62%. That's a very good number. Some people obviously don't know, but the bottom line is if you do not have your act together on this question, you may want to put out some information and educate and inform your folks how you are good stewards of taxpayer money. Here's an example of Moffat County School District RE1. Their numbers were a little bit lower, obviously, compared to Lafayette. Now, granted, asking for a city in a broad measure versus a school district, do you agree or disagree? Is the school district spending taxpayer money wisely? 45% agreed, 36% disagreed. Taking this into account, you do want to know, like, hey, we want to get these numbers up and improve them. It may be simply just educating and informing folks of how frugal and fiscally responsible you've been. But again, knowing this by voter subgroups, very important. Again, up in Moffat County, Craig, very Republican area, non-parents in GOP, which is, a large portion of the vote up there, only 41% agree with this statement. However, Democrats are very strong, if you will, in younger voters. These things matter. Step 2, general support for what you're asking for. Are people going to raise their taxes for issue X or problem X? And again, this is an example in Moffat County RE2. Generally speaking, would you support or oppose a property tax mill levy increase to fund necessary infrastructure repairs, maintenance, and capital projects for every school in the district? We didn't bring up the amount of the tax. We did not bring up how much it was going to cost them. I just want a general measurement, just for the general idea. Would you be willing to go there? 50% said they would, 40% they would not. That's what I mean by a general measurement. We did a project in the town of Vail, helping out them secure a dedicated funding source for affordable housing. Again, we're not bringing up what was a half-cent sales tax, but we're just simply asking, do you support, undefined tax increase, to create a dedicated funding source for housing? 46% support, 45% oppose, 50-50, not very good, but at least we know where we are. This is where we're sort of starting out. And again, breaking it up and understanding that by voter subgroup. Okay, the uninformed ballot test question. This is very important. What am I talking about? After we go through those measurements, we then get to the details. I haven't said anything about the ballot measure. I haven't said anything about how the money is going to be spent. And this is an example of what we did in Moffat County School District RE1. And I'm just going to read this to you. One bond measure being considered by the school board would increase residential property taxes by 11.9 mils to fund $40 million of necessary infrastructure repairs, maintenance, and capital projects at several different schools in the district. And then we include the cost information. The mill levy increase would cost homeowners $14 a month or $170 a year on a home valued at $200,000. This is a paraphrased, uninformed ballot measurement. And what we're doing is we're giving them the cost details. We're giving them a general idea of how the money is going to be spent. Would you support or oppose this? 43% said they would approve. 50% said they would reject. Another example. Greater Eagle Fire Protection District. This is an example of what we read, where we are showing the example of the exact, in all its ugliness, ballot language. And the reason we're doing this is because that's exactly what they're going to read when they open up their ballots. And this simply says, as you may know, there may be a question on the ballot this November regarding funding for the Greater Eagle Fire Protection District. I'm now going to read or show you the ballot language. After reading or hearing it, please tell me if you would vote yes and approve or vote no and reject. And so here's all of its ugliness. Shall Greater Eagle fire protection taxes be increased $220,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if we have ballot language, I want to test that. If we don't have that, we're going to want to paraphrase it, because there's times too where we'll do the survey and that hasn't been crafted yet. And they're actually going to hold off on crafting that ballot language based on how our survey goes. Here's another example. So that Town of Vale ballot measure that we did for housing. Simply asking, if an election were being held today, would you vote yes and approve a half-cent sales tax increase to establish a funding source for housing initiatives, developments, and programs? As you can see, now that we tell them what the tax is, it's a sales tax. It would be a 0.5%. 52% said they would approve. 42% said that they would reject. Okay, the next step is educating and informing respondents of the ballot measure. It's time to tell your story. It's time to let these voters know, all right, other than just the cost and generally what it's for, let's really get into the weeds, because the weeds do matter, folks. And it's also sort of going to forecast what people should learn, considering there'll be an ample amount of effort put into the campaign of educating and informing people. This is the opening language that we used in Moffat County School District. We will now share information about some of the school infrastructure projects and primary reasons why the school board is considering a bond measure. After reading the different info, please indicate if you're more likely to vote yes or if you're more likely to vote no and reject. Let's get started. And we tested probably about 12 different messages and information, and that's what we refer to them as, because we don't know what little nugget of the overall effort is going to really work well. What was the number one message that people gave them reason to support the ballot measure? The school district has applied for a BEST grant from the Colorado Department of Education. The district may receive up to $6 million in matching funds from this grant if voters approve the bond measure. Nearly 7 out of 10 respondents said, that would be more interesting for me to vote for it. Message number 2, and this is where you can really start understanding how to position and discuss what you want to get done. If approved, the bond funds would pay for the $5.9 million costs for new asphalt, concrete, and drainage repairs to nearly every school building in the district, including, stick the name of those schools in there. You want to absolutely let people know there is something for them. Early Childhood Center, Sandrock, Sunset, et cetera, et cetera. And if you read through the rest of these are the ones that really, tested the best, that gave reason for people to support the ballot measure. So when you announce the ballot measure and get into it, it just makes common sense. Lead with these 4 messages. In addition to learning what is good and may drive people to support something, this message testing approach in the survey is also helpful to identify what the least effective things to say, or even decide, don't even talk about this. And when we did the Moffat County ballot measure, we did have this message, and this was the least effective, if not the negative message. If approved, the bond funds would pay for $4.3 million costs of a new football field, new track, bleachers, lights, and press box for Moffat County High School. Now, this is up in Craig. I assume that perhaps this may go over better because, football field, a community meeting spot, brings people together. No way, no how. Only 40% said that they were more likely to vote yes after hearing this, and they wanted nothing to do with that. They only wanted the dollars going to exactly those infrastructure needs. So that's just one example of how the survey was helpful to craft the ballot measure. Same thing in the city of Lafayette. We're now going to share some information of you considering a ballot measure to generate a new funding source for public safety service and needs. Again, after hearing the information or reading it, please tell if you're more likely to support or oppose. Well, what did we learn in Lafayette? Lafayette's a very progressive Democratic community. There was a concern that if the ballot measure did include the hiring of 4 police officers, a lot of voters may have pause just simply because they were supporters, if you will, of, reform the police movements, if you will. But what we really found from this ballot measure or from the survey was the number one thing, or one of the top things people liked, was the hiring of mental health co-responders to accompany police on calls involving behavioral health issues to minimize violence, arrests, and the use of jails. They love that. And so if you were in a community and we're looking to pass a public safety ballot measure, just the general idea and concept and letting them know these things were going to go towards funds. If the tax passed, we're going to pay for these things is just going to help you know. Now, we also did sort of an A/B testing where half of the respondents we read and said the hiring of 4 police officers. This will allow the department to have a minimum of 3 on duty at all times rather than 2. The additional officers will help to reduce response times and put more focus on community policing. 72% of folks did support this, but as you can see, 22% were more likely to reject it. Not strong levels of opposition, but it was more measurable. So again, that's just another example of how you can do that. Okay, step 4, let's measure that voter movement. We had the uninformed ballot test, and then we have the informed. So what are we looking at? Well, this is just an example of what we read in Moffett. Thank you for taking the time for reading the information about why the school district is considering the bond measure. Give them the same information again. This is what it's going to cost on a home valued at X for this mill levy increase, et cetera, et cetera. And after measuring this, 52% did say they were going to approve it. Going further, overall, we can see on the uninformed ballot test, approval was at 43%, and it went up to 52%. Opposition dropped 8 points, and 6% were undecided. We also like to look at the change by voter subgroup. Which group really moved the most? And luckily for Moffett, it was the seniors. Those seniors make up a very large portion of odd year voting in November. So that was pretty good movement coming up off of 32. They wanted nothing to do with this. Now, granted, unfortunately, this ballot measure did not pass. But at the end of the day, at least it gave the school district and decision makers an idea of whose minds can we really change. But most importantly, what we also do after the informed ballot measure question is we now ask them in an open-ended format, in your own words, please describe the reason why you're voting yes. And major themes will emerge. This is really the good stuff that helps you understand, are there things that are, why are supporters like this? Why do people oppose it? So that you perhaps can address them and get some more support coming out of it. If all these improvements are needed, I compare our school district to what Hayden and Meeker did to get the new schools. There must be more governmental help to get funds so there is not such a large tax change, et cetera, et cetera. But most importantly, we really like to know the no. Why did 42% of voters say, I'm not going for this? Tax is already too high. I can't afford a mill levy increase that high. It's just too much. Now's not the time. COVID, the plant shutting down, oil and gas jobs going away. And then this is honest too, lack of distrust that the district will manage projects appropriately. So this is going to give you everything you need to know about where opposition is from the horse's mouth, if you will. And it's very, very important and relevant. Same thing in the example of Vail here. This is the informed ballot test that we did for the Vail Housing Initiative. Now that you've heard some information, would you support or oppose it? Here's the change in support. Initially, support was at 52. Approval got up to 57. I think the actual ended up being about 54. And again, here's some information by voter subgroup. And then again, one more time, the open-ended ballot measure. Why are you supporting this ballot measure? Our community will cease to exist, if we do not find housing for year-round residents. The housing crisis is real and growing. $500,000 is not affordable for people who are essential workers, or simply, I watch good employees struggle to find affordable housing and in the end, keeping up. They feel that this will help alleviate those problems in the community. Why are people voting no? This is a private sector problem. The last thing I want is the public sector at any level involved in the real estate market, male 55-64. I would rather see the revenue come from property taxes or a short-term rental tax. So again, this gets you all the information behind the why, and you get the whole picture. Okay, now real quickly, I'm just going to walk through ballot language. We're currently, or did conduct, a post-ballot measure survey for Brighton School District 27J. They had a ballot measure, one passed and one just came up short. 52% voted no on ballot issue 5A that would have funded teacher salaries and STEM programs. This survey only interviewed folks that did vote in the 2021 election to understand why they voted no, and if there are things that to be able to reposition the ballot measure for a better day. Just an example on this right now. Change number 1, understanding changes that could have increased support. The first paragraph of ballot issue 5A mentions an increase of an additional mill levy of not to exceed 8 mills. Would you be more likely to consider voting yes in approving ballot issue 5A if the language included information about how much an 8 mil increase would cost annually on a home valued at $500,000? This is important, folks, because a lot of times voters read this and they can't calculate in the head how much the mill levy is going to be taken out of their pockets. Well, out of all the respondents in this survey, 47%, they would have been more likely to vote yes if they had that little bit of information. And then here's kind of more of a general one. Would you be more likely to vote yes and approve ballot issue 5A if the amount was less than 8 mils? A quarter of people said that. But what I really wanted to show you here is there's 2 ballot measures last year in Colorado. And these are examples of how that information was actually inserted in the ballot language. Now, we're not attorneys. We don't mean to hop out of our lane, if you will. Our job is really to measure voter opinion appropriately and support and opposition levels and help you understand where to go. But this is a ballot measure that was in the West Route Fire Protection District, up in Steamboat, near Steamboat, showing, dropping language in here so that people can actually get their head around, okay, $21 a year per $100,000 of assessed property value. Or the one in Ouray County, $14.30 a year of property taxes per $100,000. That's legal. It's okay to do that. And it can be worth as much as 4 points in support. And then here's just one other question I want to address. A lot of people, how specific do you need to be in your ballot language? I always suggest you need to err on the side of being too specific. Voters do want the specificity of it. They really do want to know where the money's going. This is an example of 27J. The following language in ballot issue 5A describes how some of the $16 million in education funding would be spent. And these are the actual ballot or the bullet points that were in the ballot language: recruiting, attracting, and retaining quality teachers and staff by increasing salaries, providing enhanced career-focused learning and technical education, and so forth. Do you think this ballot language is specific enough describing how the $16 million is going to be spent, or would you prefer to see more information and details? This is the measurement just among the folks who voted no. 46% it's specific enough. Nearly half said they would prefer to see more information. So again, that's just something I wanted to throw in there today, to give you an idea on ballot language. Now I'm going to talk about just how do we conduct our surveys? Are they all telephone or are they text? They're mail. We don't do mail at all. We refuse to do that, and nobody should, to be very honest with you, today's technology. But we offer phone surveys. They're more expensive than phone and text combined. We also text-only surveys. And then what our most popular real approach is texting and offering telephone interviews to senior citizens or older folks so they have more than one way to participate in the survey. And I just want to show you on this slide, here's some examples of what an MMS text invitation looks like that we design and send. It's professional looking. It ensures trust into the voters. They understand it's coming from you. The reach is phenomenal. And what I mean by that is typically any district that we're surveying in Colorado, we're going to have at least 50% of the registered voters' cell phone numbers to be able to send this to. So it's very cost effective for us to literally light up and make aware of your district, your residents, your voters, that a ballot measure is being considered. They want to hear from you. I guarantee you it's going to be larger than your own internal email list. And people are more likely to engage on their phones when they see, oh, it's coming from the city of Boulder. It's coming from the Loveland Housing Authority. Engagement numbers are really, really strong. And just to be very honest with you, people prefer taking surveys on the phone, meaning you can take the survey by clicking and answering the questions very, very easily. People prefer that. We can add more questions into this because they can move through it quicker. It's just a phenomenal survey data collection method that we've really mastered and try to provide to our clients because it just results in phenomenal sample sizes. And what I mean by that is, for example, that Town of Vail project, they only have 3,900 voters. And in a 21 election, likely only 1,300 voters. A phone-only survey is not going to probably get me, at best, no more than 200 respondents. But with the text approach, with help promoting this survey, by the way, in the Town of Vail, we interviewed nearly 700 respondents. That's pretty darn strong. Town of Monument, 3,500 likely voters. We interviewed 500. Town of Wellington, a 700 N response for a community survey of that's nearly 10% of the population. So my point is, especially for small areas, you can get really, really good sample sizes, and that's a more accurate survey that allows us to drill down, and it's going to be more accurate and representative. And the other thing, just to finish up, it's not like, oh, we're only getting 10% of our unweighted data is seniors. It's not. On average, 20% of our unweighted data, meaning, how many people are 65 or older that are participating in the text survey, it's typically around 20% of our sample or higher than that. They are comfortable with it. It's professional. It's just a really good communication from the organization. So with that said, I may have run over a little bit. I appreciate your time and effort here. So questions. And again, give me a second to read some of them here. And here's a question. You may address this at some point, but do you ever ask questions like, if you said no on supporting this proposal or issue, what would you need to learn, or what would you need to change in order to vote yes? Very good question. You really run the risk by adding a question like that, because if you're asking questions like that, you're sending a message to your community that you may not exactly have your act together. It's almost like you're fishing for a dollar amount that they can get away with, and that you really don't know how much money you need. So I would strongly recommend not to do that. There's nothing wrong with asking if a couple, you're obviously, because if you ask, say, like, would you vote for a 0.5% sales tax versus a quarter sales tax? People are more likely going to want the quarter sales tax. Nobody likes to pay taxes. But the bottom line is when you're doing this survey, remember, this is a message to the entire community that you work within. You want to make sure that you come across as having your act together. That's why all that information is so important. It's going to cost X. This is how much money we need. And we think that this mill levy rate is what we need to get to that number to meet our needs and get the job done. Okay, question again. David, are you able to use your collection of survey data and experience to consult with a local government determining the timing of a potential tax question with respect to things like midterm cycle, competition with other proposed ballot measures, and so forth? Very good question. And honestly, to hop back, that what really helps us determine that and advise when to go to the ballot. Yes, first and foremost, talk to your friends. Is the school district going to the ballot? Is the water district going to the ballot? Understand what you're competing against, because competition does matter on a crowded local ballot. But to answer your question, Tom, I go all the way back right here to our demographics. Here's the thing, folks. The easiest time to pass a ballot measure that raises revenue is always in a presidential election year. Why is that? Well, younger voters that are typically not homeowners, not to say that's going to apply everywhere across the state, but you're going to have more tax tolerant people turning out to vote. And if it's for a school district or something they really understand and it doesn't impact them, especially if it's like a mill levy, they're going to be more likely to support or consider it. So we can advise, Tom, on that sort of thing by doing a breakout like this, for Garfield County, where you are. So again, that's something to look at. But we can also, because here's the thing, the larger the number of seniors, the harder it's going to be to pass a ballot measure, because seniors, with all due respect, are on fixed incomes. And as much as they may want to help you out, they simply can't afford it, especially in these days with inflation. Okay, another question. How important or effective is it to add a sunset provision to the ballot language? Will it increase support as much as people say? This is a really good question. Sunset provisions, folks, and what I mean by that is in the ballot language, you have language that says this tax will go in effect in, starting January of 2022, and it will automatically be repealed and go away in 5 years. Does that really move the needle a ton? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the kind of ballot measure. Let me give you an example. In 2015, we passed a road funding ballot measure in the city of Colorado Springs, a very anti-tax Republican strong area. Mayor Suthers there did a very good job. They needed $250 million to address local roads and infrastructure. They did a I believe it was a quarter-cent sales tax, and it was in effect for 5 years. It was going to raise $50 million a year, and then in 5 years, it went away. It passed with 61% support. And in fact, the mayor, and in fact, some people on that effort were questioning the poll of whether or not it was going to be accurate or not. But it was, because that's the right way to go about getting money and doing things. It definitely is a good way of doing that. Where other times in other areas where it's like, okay, it'll sunset in 10 years. People are like, I don't care in 10 years. I don't even know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years. And it may only be 2 or 3% support. We do test it from time to time. But I also know local government and staff are like, boy, we really would like to have this dedicated new revenue so that we can balance out our budgets and we're not hopping around all the time. We completely understand that and sympathize with you on that. So another question. How specific should the ballot language be in describing how the funding should be spent? I cannot stress enough how much detail it works. I disagree vehemently with people that say, no, voters aren't going to read this. This is just going to make their head spin. Yeah, those statewide ballot measures, sure, they're going to gloss over, not even answer them. But their local ballot measures that touches them, they are going to read. They do want to know where this money's going. And typically when they have that information, it does help build support for a ballot measure. And it also demonstrates to the voters that this district or this organization or this local government has their act together. So again, error on the side of detail. Here's another question. How important is it that a city council, school district, or special district board of directors are united in support for a ballot measure? Folks, over 15 years, we've done a lot of these. I remember that we had a crowded ballot up in Steamboat Springs one year. And 2 of the council members up there opposed a tax that was put before voters. And even though they didn't have a lot of money and they weren't running a massive no campaign, unity really does help. And if the board is not unified, it really does make it more challenging to pass a ballot measure without question. But again, I would also use like the Vale Town Council. They were united in supporting the half-cent sales tax increase. And some of them were up for re-election and they had their own issues to deal with, an election going on. But that unity really did help all of us say, look, we've all looked at this problem and we all agree that this is at this time the best approach to secure funding for housing. And just one more note on that, folks. We've been pulling that issue up there for them since, 6-7 years ago. And time again, I'd like, do not go forward with a ballot question because support wasn't there. It was in the low to mid 40s. But because of what mountain communities are experiencing today with home prices going up and everywhere, by the way, because, when I go to CCI meetings and CCCMA meetings and I do my own little questions, what in your part of Colorado is the number one issue or problem? I'm amazed at how much housing or even just increasing rents is a big headwind and problem that a lot of you elected officials and staff are trying to address. So I think that is everything for now. One thing I would just say, if you're curious, how much does this cost? How much are our surveys? We have our pricing sheet up in the right-hand corner. If you click on handouts, look, every project we price out individually based on the needs of the project. And what I mean by that is most ballot measure surveys, I really do recommend getting about 100 telephone interviews of those seniors because they're the ones that are really going to say no. And I really want to double down and make sure that we have a strong sample of those seniors. So we will do a phone hybrid along with, MMS texting. Other times, MMS texting alone does a very good job in measuring voter opinion. And I understand, too, it's a lot more cost effective. And with that said, so please go ahead and take that down. Okay, and I'm sorry, we've got one more late question coming in from Tom. How far in advance of an election date do you suggest polling begin? Well, it's not by coincidence we're doing this webinar in January. You're fine to do a poll starting now, and we're going to do these kinds of polls all the way through. We always have some fire drills come in, even in like the first week of August. And depending on when it must be referred to the ballot, we typically like to do them no later than August 1st. So the one advantage of doing something ahead of time and getting it done in the spring or the late winter is that if you decide to refer the ballot, something to the ballot sooner rather than later, it gives more time for the organization, either the county, the town, the local government, or the school district, to have and talk to voters about why they're doing this. So there's more time for people to become aware of the ballot measure. At the same time, though, we've also done things where literally they only have 5 days. We're literally in the field with just one, a question of the exact ballot language to see, and certain city council members or school districts are like, we're going to put this on the ballot if we think it's going to go ahead. So I would say, that's sort of your window. But our probably busiest season, for forecasting what's going to happen is late winter into midsummer is usually a pretty busy time for us. So that's what we have done in the past. Okay, well, thank you all for attending. I hope I wasn't too long-winded or talked too quickly. Feel free to contact us at magellanstrategies.com. We'd love to talk to you if you have something in mind. And again, there's no charge to give us a call, okay? It's no charge for us to put together one of these demographic sheets. We're here to help you make the best decisions and move forward, and understand, folks, we work for you. It's about helping you measuring and understanding your voters or your residents as accurately as possible so you all can make good decisions and don't, get out of turn or perhaps do something that your community, doesn't agree with. So again, thank you very much. We're going to wind it down here probably in the next 20 seconds. You will all receive a copy of this ballot measure, and just thank you very much for your time today. And drive safe in the snow wherever you may be in the state. So we'll see you soon.